Hey everyone, it's Dr. Nightstare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. I heard it first while working near my cabin. A steady drone that carried across the land from David Anderson's remote property. The sound was persistent, a constant presence drifting through the clearings and among the tall pine trees. David Anderson was a renowned local eccentric and a dedicated prepper. He had built a formidable bunker years prior, a massive structure the community often joked about as being overkill for any future trouble. I did not think much of that sound for a long time. It was simply David being David, after all. He always had some project going on, some new contraption humming to life deep within his woods. I figured it was his generator, running longer than usual, or perhaps a new pump he had installed for his well water. This quiet valley had a way of absorbing oddities into its rhythm. The air here was usually still, broken only by the wind moving through the forest or the distant calls of wildlife. That kind of strange behavior was simply David, a part of his way of life we all understood and accepted. I lived my days as always watching the sun rise and set over the familiar landscape, a deceptive calm settling over everything even as the sound continued its unbroken beat. The drone continued its relentless presence over the weeks, unchanging. But then David Anderson himself began to change. He was no longer the David, the first of us first, his once robust frame thinning and his shoulders hunched when I caught glimpses of him near the edge of his property. His usual purposeful stride had given way to a shuffling walk, his head often bowed, as if the weight of something invisible pressed down upon him. The laughter and boisterous greetings he once offered were gone entirely. He no longer appeared in town for supplies, a striking absence in the small community where his errands had been a familiar sight. His truck, usually a dusty fixture on the general store's gravel lot, sat perpetually in his own driveway. This abrupt cessation of David's routine forced his wife, Sarah, into the role of sole provider. She started making the trips into town, her face growing more drawn with each passing day. Her eyes, once bright with an enduring patience for David's quirks, now held a troubled worry that etched lines around them. One afternoon, she stopped at my place, a rare visit, her hands twisting nervously in her lap as she sat across from me on my porch. The ever-present hum from David's property seemed to settle over us, a low, pulsing beat that was suddenly much more menacing. "It's not right," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the drone. Her gaze drifted toward the distant pines where David's bunker lay hidden. "He's in there, all the time now. He doesn't sleep. He barely eats." She described his nights, spent hunched over something within the metal walls, illuminated by a single dim work light. He calls it the Thing, a dark metal machine. "It pulses a low song," she said. "He talks to it like it's a living creature, like a child." Sarah's voice dropped lower, steeped in a terror that seized my attention. "He whispers about the little one," he said. "A new life, birthed from metal. He thinks it's growing in there." The words caused a sickening realization within me. The generator hum I had so easily dismissed, and the prepper's eccentricities I had rationalized away, suddenly took on a terrifying meaning. A cold, heavy dread grew deep in my chest, tightening with each beat of my own heart. What she described, David tending a metal machine as if it were an infant, speaking of a new life emerging from within it, resonated with a deep wrongness. Everything I thought I knew about David, about this valley, about the natural order of things, broke apart in that moment. Sarah's fear was my fear, and I understood with an undeniable certainty that something deeply unnatural was indeed unfolding down there. deep within the reinforced concrete and steel of David Anderson's bunker. Then, one morning, Sarah's car was no longer in her driveway, and the lights in the house remained dark even as evening fell. I waited, giving them space, but another full day passed with no sign of her. I tried to reach her phone repeatedly, my calls going unanswered each time. The hum from David's property continued its steady beat across the valley, unchanged, but now it sounded different to my ears, no longer just a distant drone, but a constant reminder of what Sarah had told me. 2 full days after Sarah's car vanished, a knot of worry tightened in my stomach, compelling me to act. I could no longer ignore the growing dread. The next morning, the sun was just clearing the eastern ridge when I set out on the long walk toward the isolated Anderson property. The path wound through familiar pines, but the air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. When I emerged from the tree line, David and Sarah's small house stood ominously empty, its windows like dark, unseeing eyes. No smoke rose from the chimney, and no clothes hung on the line. The truck still sat rusting in the driveway, untouched. But the hum, it was no longer just a sound carried on the air. It was a tangible pressure, a deep vibration that traveled through the ground, resonating up through the soles of my boots. The house offered no answers, so I followed the vibration. It led me, with an undeniable pull, around the back of the house and deeper into the property, toward the reinforced concrete mound that housed the bunker. The sound intensified with every step, growing from a deep thrum in the earth to a pulsing beat that seemed to resonate within my own chest. There, partially hidden by overgrown brush, was the great metal plate of the bunker hatch. Fresh mud, still dark and clinging, ringed the edges of the heavy metal door. I moved closer, my hand reaching out to touch the cold steel. The hatch pulsed with the sound, a steady, rhythmic vibration under my palm, drawing me in, directly to the core of the mystery David Anderson had so carefully hidden. The cold steel of the bunker hatch pulsed beneath my fingertips, a steady, unsettling rhythm. The hum, no longer distant, was a palpable force against my palm, vibrating through the bones of my hand and up my arm. From beneath the great metal plate, distinct sounds now emerged, not merely the droning hum, but something new and deeply unnerving. A low, rhythmic click, precise and unwavering, echoed from deep within the earth. It was a mechanical sound, yet imbued with an underlying sense of purpose. Then, a soft scrape, like something heavy dragging itself across stone, followed by another measured click. The pattern of movement was undeniable, suggesting something alive, something deliberate moving within the confined space below, systematically nearing the surface. My breath hitched in my throat, a dry gasp. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat against the rising, intensifying hum. "David," I called out, my voice thin and reedy, swallowed immediately by the vibrating air that pressed in around me. "Sarah?" I tried again, a plea for some human response in this terrible solitude. No answer came back to me from the depths, only the escalating drone, an oppressive weight pressing down from the bunker. It seemed to intensify with each passing second, a physical force that vibrated through my bones and blurred the edges of the world around me. The very air grew thick with its reverberation, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. Suddenly, a new sound pierced the air from beneath the hatch, utterly different from anything I had heard before. It began as a high, thin whine, like stressed metal under immense pressure or a strained, dying motor. But there was an underlying organic quality to the sound, a resonance that made my skin crawl with primal fear. The whine began to rise, gaining both pitch and volume with terrifying speed, escalating into an unbearable, non-human scream. It was a sound of pure agony or intense creation, a sound so alien and piercing that it brought with it a distinct feeling of wrongness to the morning. It bypassed all reason and went straight to the deepest, most animalistic parts of my fear. a sound meant to shatter sanity. The scream cut off abruptly, leaving behind a ringing echo in my ears that was quickly filled by a different, equally terrifying sound. A voice. It was cold, flat, mechanical, devoid of any human warmth or inflection. It echoed from below the ground, resonating through the heavy metal of the hatch, chilling me to my core with its unnatural timbre. Harvest, the voice stated, clear and precise, each syllable meticulously articulated. Completion. There was a brief pause, a moment of dreadful anticipation that stretched into an eternity. New life, ready to emerge. The final words were delivered with a horrifying sense of finality, a declaration of a grotesque birth. The words hung in the air, a chilling prophecy of horror. Then the hatch itself began to tremble violently. The great metal plate shuddered and bucked, rattling with incredible force against its reinforced concrete frame. A deep groaning sound emanated from the massive bolts holding it in place, straining and screeching under immense pressure from within the bunker. The ground around me vibrated with a powerful tremor, making me stumble backwards from the immediate danger. The hatch convulsed again, bucking upwards with an explosive force threatening to burst free at any moment. Something massive and terrifying pushed against it from below, pushing with an undeniable, growing force, signaling the imminent, terrible emergence of David's impossible creation. The metal groaned its protest, but it would not hold. Primal terror surged through me, a raw, screaming instinct that severed all reason. I turned and ran, not back to the path I had taken, but blindly through the dense undergrowth, away from the bunker, away from the shuddering hatch and the cold, mechanical voice. My lungs burned, air tearing at my throat with each gasping breath, but I dared not slow, dared not look back. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig behind me was the sound of something monstrous, something impossible, gaining ground. The deep vibration, the constant hum, felt like a physical presence at my heels. It was no longer just a distant drone. It was a promise of inescapable terror, echoing in my skull. My cabin appeared through the trees, a desperate, sudden haven. I burst through the front door, slamming it shut with a violence that jarred the whole frame. My hand scrambled for the heavy deadbolt, clicking it into place. I dragged the old wooden chest against the door, then the small kitchen table, pushing them with frantic strength, piling anything I could find, creating a barrier against the unimaginable. I sank to the floor, panting, eyes wide and staring at the barricaded door. But the deep vibration, the hum, persisted. It wasn't just outside anymore. It resonated through the floorboards, a subtle tremor that vibrated up through my very bones. It filled the air within my small home, a constant, chilling reminder. It was out there now, David's terrible creation. The little one had emerged. It was moving, growing, and it was undoubtedly coming. For me. For everyone. There would be no escape.